And I've been joined now as well by Eoghan Corry, who is editor of Travel Extra. Eoghan, thanks for coming in to us this morning. You're here to talk to us about travel plans in the context of the coronavirus, because we've already been discussing the economic impact and the medical impact indeed. But I think there are a lot of people out there who are, have flights booked for their holidays to go abroad or have various different plans made and who are wondering what they should do. So firstly, yourself, you're just back from Colombia.
Just back in from Colombia, yeah. It's quite interesting to travel to a country that has no coronavirus case and has, people on the flight with masks, almost all incorrectly worn or of no benefit whatsoever. People making themselves uncomfortable in long haul flights. Big hub airports that I passed through, a lot of mask wearing. Immigration officials with masks. Big notices up. Beware of coronavirus. These are the symptoms. This is a country where 10,000 people a year die of TB. There's a reason to wear masks. The indigenous communities are being ravaged by diseases that some people listening will remember from their own family history. And all of this is being cast aside for what is the celebrity virus. Resources being diverted, attention being diverted, and it's a crazy thing to watch as someone who spends an awful lot of my life in departure lounges, that because of the infodemic, I think it was described as initially this year, that is almost causing as much damage as the epidemic, if not more.
Okay, well, in terms of what people are actually doing, because some people are very scared, I think, is there evidence that people are cancelling holidays? Yeah. There is.
What we're seeing so far is no-shows. The airlines will not have cancelled the China services. That's a big deal for Ireland on its own. We spent 10 years trying to get direct services to China. Hainan will not be returning this year. I can tell you that's not publicised, but that's not going to happen. That means that our direct Beijing and Shenzhen services are gone. The new Shanghai service from Zhuhai, it's been postponed. It's unlikely to happen this year. And our direct Cathay Pacific service due to resume March 27 back to June 30. But if you look on the internet, the only classes booked are the ordinary classes. There are no incentive fares. That's usually a bad sign. So direct to China, it's in trouble from Ireland. Now, there are if people still travelling to China, you wouldn't think it listening to the media, but there are direct services from Heathrow. The Chinese carriers are still operating. China isn't that big a deal for us. What is a big deal for us is that Italy is now in the equation as well. Aer Lingus and Ryanair are not cancelling their services. The programme of tours that are going to Italy still resilient enough. I mean, we've a lot of school tours booked to ski resorts in Italy. We've had, of all of them, we've just had one cancellation. We've had other cases where individual children have pulled out and, it's place the parents fitting in spaces, things like that. All of that is under threat. That ease of travel that a whole generation has grown up with is under threat. And it's under threat really because of this individual fear, this celebrity virus that is lurking out there and stalking us. And in fact, when you look at the instances of coronavirus in Italy versus seasonal flu, the instances in Ireland of seasonal flu are something like 280 deaths in a bad year, 100 in a good year. We have a disproportionate reaction, which is shutting down our international travel, really, really, really stressing people who have holidays booked. And from where I'm looking, it makes no sense whatsoever, because the statistics of the dangers that we encounter when we're abroad, 300 Irish people die every year abroad, the same things that kill us at home, road accidents, drownings, all of those sort of things. We're paying more attention to this one celebrity virus than we are to more real threats that are lurking.
Anthony, do you agree with all that? Are people overdoing it? Or would you advise people to book their flights to Northern Italy and you'll be fine?
I wouldn't go to Northern Italy now. I just wouldn't, but I'm quite immunosuppressed anyway, so probably that's a good idea. But I don't think there is overreaction. This is a new virus. It's quite infectious. It causes a really severe illness in a very small proportion of people infected. If we have a small number of cases in Ireland, we will cope really well. We'll be fine. If we have thousands of cases, we are in serious trouble because our health service will be overwhelmed very quickly.
It's straining anyway.
So it is strange anyway, but what we're trying to do now is to minimise. We are going to have more cases, but it makes a big difference whether we have 5 more cases or 500 more cases. It makes a huge difference to our economy and to our health service.
But in terms of travel plans for people, and people will have their holidays booked, a lot of them by now, and some of those holidays will be to Tenerife and some of those holidays will be to North. One of my friends is getting married in North Italy in May and she's going out of her mind. So what, I mean, in your view, I mean, Eoghan is saying he thinks it's safe enough. Are you, Eoghan? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Keep travelling.
You're saying
is my
keep
words.
travelling.
Pretty simple.
I'd be very careful about where you go to. If I was getting married in Venice later this year, yeah, I'd go. If I was getting married in one of the towns north of Piacenza, no, I wouldn't go.
See, I think, Eoghan and I know each other a long time, and I think he frequently speaks. He usually speaks a lot of common sense. But I would take issue. I think that of course, we've discussed it earlier. Economic, commerce, industry, all of those things are exceptionally important. But if I had a child going on a ski trip to northern Italy, near to those places, wouldn't send them. You know, I think you have to have common sense. You have to look at the information as it's presented to you. Avoid fake news and scaremongering.
But if the HSE
we've seen from China that they have managed to contain it in some ways by trying to be. I mean, they have a very different political regime there. Admittedly, it's easier to control. But I think it's pure common sense that we would try to contain it as much as we can, not sending people, into the fire, if you like, and then coming back and spreading it more.
Yes, just to give you a sense of the dilemmas that this presents regarding travel. 2 weeks from today, I'm supposed to bring a group of about 15 students to Brussels for a 1-week study trip. Something that's a kind of feature of our programme and very important. But we've obviously looked very carefully at the advice that the HSE has proffered, similarly the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Yet I'm looking ahead and I'm wondering, well, if the escalatory chain reaches Brussels within days, as it could, given the proximity of northern Italy and Brussels, then we could get there and find that we're under lockdown, that we won't be able to actually return. Or it could be the case that by the 15th, the day we're supposed to leave, that here in Ireland, our schools and universities will also be under lockdown, depending on how many new cases emerge. So
what about
those
that
are the practical dilemmas that we're all
because
facing.
we saw, for example, a couple of articles in yesterday's papers about people coming back from areas and then having to go into quarantine for 14 days. So you do have to take that on board, even by virtue of travelling. Don't you?
That is a bigger risk than the hotel going into lockdown, being in an environment where one person is tests positive and everybody being locked down. That's a bigger risk, but it's still. We do 420,000 people go to the Canary Islands each year. We've had one hotel locked down. Even if it spirals at the rate, it's not comparable with the diseases, the existing conditions out there, the dengue fever that kills 30,000 a year. Ebola had a 70% death rate. There was, it shut down 3 African countries.
But what about
this is a 2% death rate?
By virtue of just travelling, I mean being in an airport or being on an airplane. We've seen, for example, the lady that came back from Northern Ireland. Some of the people who were on the airplane with her have been told that people who are sitting close to her have been told they have to go into quarantine.
2 rows.
So you might even be going to somewhere that is not necessarily one of the areas that you've been told are dangerous. You could be going anywhere and end up on a plane with somebody who has been coming from somewhere else, and then next thing you're in quarantine. So is that not a reason to stay at home?
It's not a reason to stay at home, but it is I'm not saying that that this is not a risk. I'm saying that it must be assessed in its real terms, not in what the whole media echo chamber has created. We've had the EU Health Commissioner saying the same thing: keep the borders open. She describes the reactions as closing borders as inefficient. There is another problem. You end up diverting resources, not so much in Ireland, and we know our health service is under strain, but not as under strain as the countries that suffer from Ebola, where resources are diverted from more immediate problems. And the way, like I can imagine, this is hopefully not a prediction, the first major stress on our coronavirus capability in Ireland would probably not come from Irish cases. We are the main artery air artery to North America. So we could end up at 280 passengers arriving in Limerick or a Dublin hotel for immediate isolation and all of those. Yes, be ready for it. Yes, take all those checks, but don't start diverting resources. Don't start don't create this situation where politicians, the scientists and the health people will do what scientists and health people do. They can't rule out the worst case scenario. They deal in facts. The politicians will react and say we're under pressure to shut borders. We have travel advisories. If you arrive in Nauru, nobody goes to Nauru, thankfully. If you arrive in Nauru this morning, you'll be told you're not let in because you're from Ireland.
What should people do then in terms of travel insurance? If they have already their flights booked and their holidays booked, is it too late?
Oh, no, not at all. You've got a 7-day moratorium. So that's a really important. You can't, there's the travel, your normal travel, let's start at the beginning. Your normal travel insurance policy will not cover disruption. This is the phrase in the travel document, in the insurance document, is disruption. Your normal €100 travel for the year insurance won't cover that. It's not that expensive to get the extra disruption cover. It's about €10 for a single trip, 17 for annual. The real problem is that if you're buying it now for a flight this week, you won't get it because obviously disruption cover is now a big deal. But it is for sale, and it is for sale for those people like the wedding in a few months' time. What the aviation and tourist industries are expecting, and everybody is like generals in a war, they always fight the last war and the last battle. They are looking at SARS. They looked at a very deep decline and a very quick recovery. And they were hoping that this coronavirus is going to behave in exactly the same way. Now, over the last week, because of Italy, particularly because of Italy and the fact that 6 continents are now in play and non-contact is now in play, they're probably, not as sure about that. But what the people who are making major economic plans on this, and they're not just the aviation industry, want to happen is a point where it begins to recede. And they're hoping that they'll reach that. Now, all your travel plans, everything like that, the whole uncertainty about that will change once we see that coronavirus has reached its peak and goes into recession. But that's the way the aviation and the insurance industry is working at the moment. Continue as normal, and the only way you're entitled to compensation, by the way, is not if you decide that your children will be at risk going to northern Italy. The only way is if the Department of Foreign Affairs puts the travel advisory in place. The only places with a travel advisory, the only place with a travel advisory is China. The 11 towns in Italy that are named are beautiful, I'm sure. I don't know anyone who's been there. They're not on the tourist map.
Amy, you want to come in there?
There is a certain amount of personal responsibility people have to take in this area as well. But it was going to be taken away for some because there is indications that certain companies are grounding all their staff for non-essential travel. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. And, if you, on a total segue, if you take all the children that march through the cities on their environmental climate change actions, that I think staying at home is a bit of a staycation and not flying on a ski holiday over to Italy or wherever might actually be good for the planet in the long term instead of making other changes that are not sustainable.
And I think it's important to point out that Eoghan has advocated very strongly there and very knowledgeably for commerce and for the travel industry. The difficulty for governments and health authorities, well, governments in particular, is they have to balance all of those things, and between the health of people, keeping people well, keeping them alive, and the economic angle of it. So I think that's why you listen and you try and get reliable information, and you look at something like the World Health Organization and you take what they're saying on board.
What I see is an imbalance, and what the European Health Commissioner has talked about is imbalance, and what the World Health Organization have all talked about is imbalance. Sorry, I've cut in here.
No, you're fine. If you think of 2 examples we've had, one is the foot and mouth outbreak we had here. That caused immense disruption for a short period of time, but it brought the outbreak under control. If we look at this virus and compare it with the previous SARS outbreak, which had a much higher death rate, much nastier virus, but there have been no human cases of SARS, I think, for 17 years or 16 years. So we actually managed to contain it. It caused havoc for a couple of months in China and in Canada particularly. This is going, if we jump on top of this now, I think we can contain it. The Chinese have shown what can be done. The epidemic is tailing off in China.
So what would that look like in your view? Because we had Sam McConkey on the programme yesterday from the Royal College of Surgeons talking about the need at least for discussion about what he called draconian measures, such as closing the schools, banning mass gatherings over a certain amount of people, etc. Do you think that's what we need to be looking at?
I think we're talking...
A travel hiatus for people,
I think we're
non-essential?
talking about... There are questions that need to be answered, and I'm not in a position to answer them, right? But the questions that need to be answered are Paddy's Day, sporting events, cruise ships for a start. What about electric picnic? Can that go ahead? We don't know, because we don't know exactly what will be happening in May. And I think we do this with a bit of forward planning, but accepting we may need to change as we go down. Do we need to close the schools? No, it's now, beginning of March. We know that the children are very effective vectors for viruses. They don't get sick. This is not a disease that seems to commonly cause illness in kids, but that doesn't mean they can't spread it. We don't know. There's loads of stuff we just plain don't know. It might be better to take the short-term hit now. And as you have said, steep decline, rapid recovery. That would
be a big call. I'll come to you in a second, John. Sorry, Tom. That would be a big call politically from an economic perspective, wouldn't it? From political and economic perspective. Can you imagine any minister making the call? Given Simon Harris on the front page today of one of the papers being wrapped over the knuckles from Leo Varadkar about the one match.
It's a colossal call. I mean, if you think about, the music industry and, concerts that you might have picked out to go to over the summer. I mean, I've, like everybody else, I've 2 or 3 tickets already paid for. Do you go, do you not go? I think that we've got to assume that we continue to behave exactly as normal and assume that we will go. Barring if the experts say we shouldn't go, then we don't go, because if we suddenly go into complete overreaction and lockdown without the experts saying we need to, we're going to cause this ripple effect on the economy, which is going to really damage people who are going to lose their jobs, or who are going to suddenly, there's suddenly businesses that have been very solid, very consistent, are going to start struggling and could even go under.
But we, I think, should keep in mind that in one day in Italy, the number of cases went from 80 to 400. We've already got 80 in Germany, 80 in France. And because of the Schengen system, we have free movement of people throughout Europe. So it is not difficult to see that the Italian problem very quickly becomes a German one and a French one. And we could find that within days that 80 cases in Germany has become 300 or 400 or more. So this is literally going to evolve, I think, by the day. And it does. It presents all the dilemmas that Tom says, both for us as individuals and for government, about how public policy responds. There are no easy answers.
Can I just say one very short thing about that? These spikes correspond to putting more effort into looking for cases. So they're not real. It's not that the number of cases initially trebled in a day. It is that they found cases that had been there but had not yet been spotted. So in Iran at the moment, they're reporting 300 cases. The best bet is they have 30,000 cases. When they start looking, there's going to be an enormous spike of cases in Iran.
What do you mean by looking, Anthony?
Hunting people, testing people, interviewing people, checking with the health system. Governments that tell lies about this, and the Iranian government is lying through its teeth about this, are a serious problem. But the amount of travel between Iran and Ireland is very small.
300 a year.
So
you see, I don't want to be panicking people. You've just panicked me a little bit there with that statistic, Anthony. I just want to know, I think people at home are wondering, how worried should I be, and what can I do and what can't I do? And I think people are I'm really confused.
We should be
as to what.
There's a great line from WHO earlier this week, and they said we all need to be alert. And we do. We absolutely need to be alert. We do not need to be alarmed.
And wash our hands.
We need to wash our hands. If we start feeling symptoms, ring your GP, ring HSE.
But would you be, on Alison's line of, if you had children or if you were looking at travel yourself, would you be avoiding non-essential travel?
I would be avoiding non-essential travel to areas where there is coronavirus active. So, for example, I'm going to Edinburgh. I'm going to Paris on Friday, to Orly Airport, actually. A very romantic trip for a day. then I'm going to Edinburgh, then I'm going to Barcelona, all work related. But I'm going to all these places.
Okay, so you're not concerned about the airport contamination aspect of that, right?
And I'm at quite high risk for a number of different reasons, but I think the risk for me, is quite reasonable.
All right, and I just might ask the rest of the panel, will you be avoiding non-essential travel? John?
Yes.
You will?
Yes.
Amy? Yeah. Tom?
Yes, but that's
I have
probably...
no trips though.
That's to do with, like, we've a baby on the way, so
congratulations.
I'd say that,
Congratulations.
Other than in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
I know. He told me this earlier, and I thought, wow, we're still going to concerts. Now, there's in the summer, there's energy.
Owen, I know you won't be avoiding non-essential travel, given that you're just back from Colombia.
Well,
but
the major World Tourism event, ITB Berlin, which I was supposed to be at on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, will be abandoned. It's just cancelled. The economic consequences that were touched on in the travel industry, airlines will go down, but also that thing that's happened for us all, this ease of travel that we've all enjoyed has been damaged and is being damaged. And the travel has been really, really good. And to the extent that the countries, we live in a developed country, the health service that's being provided to the populations of underdeveloped or semi-developed countries is going to be damaged by the economic damage that's done by this. The damage done by the Ebola to the 3 African countries by the virus was they quantified it in the World Bank, was 80% of the damage was the economic damage done, including to their health service. So we are actually talking about things that will damage not just, somebody's profit margin, but health infrastructure around the world, which makes our ability to fight future viruses less ready, and also to contain the big killers that are out there. And there are big killers out there, like malaria.
all right, I think we're going to leave that one there for this morning, but do stay with us. We'll be back after this.